My daughter-in-law called me lower-ass trash in front of all her wedding guests. Little did that spoiled rich girl know that I had just discovered her lies and worst of all what she was hiding in the locked trunk she kept in her closet. When her dirty little secret hit the fan at the reception, she bolted in a panic. My son chucked the wedding ring on the floor. And me? Well, let's just say nobody's ever gonna call me trash again. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, make sure you smash that like button and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. My name is Martha Green. I'm 54 years old, and I own a small chain of delis and coffee bars in northern New Jersey. I started from nothing, bussing tables at a Greasy Spoon diner in Newark. Today I've got 5 locations and a team of 30 employees. It ain't an empire, but it's mine, built with honest sweat and a ton of grit. I've been a widow for 8 years. My son Ethan, who's 28, is a systems engineer and my only kid. We've always been super close, especially after his dad passed. When Ethan called to tell me he was engaged, I was over the moon. He deserved to be happy. Madison was gorgeous, sharp as a tack, and worked as an executive at a multinational corporation, or so he said. We first met at a dinner Ethan hosted, and from the jump I noticed something off. She barely made eye contact. Her answers were short, almost snippy. When I said goodbye at the end of the night, she barely moved to hug me. A forced smile and a once-over glance that seemed to size me up and find me lacking. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just nervous. Maybe I was being a bit too sensitive. But in the following weeks we had more meetups and the behavior kept up. Ethan didn't seem to notice, or he chose to look the other way. Does your mom always dress so plain? I heard her ask him once, thinking I was too far away to hear. My mom's always been practical, Ethan replied, trying to smooth things over. That stung. I might not wear Chanel, but I've always prided myself on being clean and well put together. But I bit my tongue for Ethan's sake. It was at the engagement dinner 3 months before the wedding that things really blew up. I hosted the event at one of my best coffee bars. I shut the place down, brought in a special caterer, and decked everything out with fairy lights and flowers. I wanted to show Madison that even if I was simple, I had taste, that I could throw a nice party to celebrate my son's love. Madison showed up 2 hours late, escorted by her parents, a couple in designer duds with bored expressions. She looked at the decor, the food, everything I'd fussed over, and let out an audible sigh. Ethan, honey, I thought we agreed on something more upscale. My son looked embarrassed. I thought it would be intimate and special here. Intimate and special like a Waffle House, she muttered, just loud enough for me to catch it. I tried to ignore her. I smiled. I served the dinner, which was fantastic. I tried to make small talk with her folks. Her dad kept checking his Rolex. Her mom guzzled glass after glass of wine, making cracks about how charmingly rustic everything was. Coming from her, it sounded like a put down. Then came the time for toasts. I raised my glass. To Ethan and Madison, may your love grow every day. Ethan, your father would be so proud of the man you've become. Madison, welcome to our family. That's when she looked at her mother and let out a little snort, a short mocking laugh that gave me the chills. Something funny? I asked, trying to keep it together. No, not really, she said, still smirking. It's just, family sounds so formal for something so small. You know? I mean, it's just you, a widowed coffee shop owner. Silence dropped like a stone. Ethan went pale. Madison, don't. What? I'm being honest. Your mother is acting like she's Queen Elizabeth when she's really just... She paused. She looked at me and finished. Well, low-class trash, trying to look like something she's not. In that moment, something in me snapped. Not because of the insult I'd heard worse in my life, but because of the way my son dropped his head in shame. Not of Madison. Of me. I think we should leave, Madison's mother announced, standing up. It's getting late. They left and Ethan went with them. I was left alone in my deli among half-eaten plates and half-empty glasses. 2 hours later, Ethan came back alone. Mom, I'm so sorry about Madison's behavior. She called me trash, Ethan. She didn't mean it. She was stressed about the wedding, the pressure. You know how these rich folks are. They have a different vibe. And you're okay with that? With how she talks about your mother? He didn't answer. He just said the wedding was in 3 months at a swanky resort paid for by her parents, and he hoped I could get over it by then. That night, sitting alone at home, I realized I had two choices. Accept the role of low-class trash, or find out who this woman my son wanted to marry really was. Not for revenge but for protection. Because something about that whole family setup smelled fishy. And I know the scent of a lie when I smell one. I called my old friend Dee. We met in the trenches when we were young, trying to hustle a living. While I went the coffee bar route, she became a PI, specializing in marriage fraud cases. Dee, I need your help. Something's not right with my son's fiancée. Sarah, are you sure? Maybe she's just a spoiled rich girl. It's more than that. She's cold. There's something in her eyes when she talks about money. I need to know who this girl is for real. Dee hesitated, but she agreed. The wedding was scheduled in 3 months. We had time. What we would uncover would change everything, proving that between the two of us, the one who truly deserved the title of trash was not me. The next morning, Ethan showed up at my place. He had dark circles under his eyes and looked like he hadn't slept a wink. He sat at the kitchen island while I brewed a pot. I've always made the best Joe in the city. No wonder I built my business around it. Mom, Madison wants to apologize to you. I poured the coffee without responding. She's genuinely embarrassed. She said she's never acted like that before. It was the wedding stress, the pressure. I finally sat down. Ethan, I'm gonna ask you a question, and I want you to be straight with me. What do you really know about Madison? He looked confused. What do you mean? You've been together 6 months, and she's already planning a $500,000 wedding at the most expensive resort in the area. Have you ever been to her apartment? Do you know her friends? Have you been to the office where she works? Mom, what kind of questions are these? Of course I know Madison. We're getting married. Have you been to her parents' house? He hesitated. They travel a lot. They have places in multiple countries. And her apartment? She prefers to come to mine. She says hers is always a mess with work stuff. I sighed. So obvious and yet so invisible to a man in love. Ethan, I'm going to your wedding. I'll smile. I'll pretend I was never called trash. But I ask you one thing. Don't sign anything before the wedding. No documents, no transfers, no joint accounts. Promise me. He laughed. Mom, don't be paranoid. Madison has way more cash than I do. She doesn't need my engineer's salary. Just promise me, son. He promised, more to pacify me than because he believed me. After he left, I called Dee. Can we start today? I have a bad feeling. That afternoon, we met at a coffee shop that wasn't one of mine. I didn't want to risk being spotted by anyone I knew. Dee looked the same as always. Short gray hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain, practical clothes. Nobody would guess that behind that librarian look was one of the best investigators in the tri-state area. So what's the intel on the princess? She asked. Madison Baker, 27 years old, supposedly a marketing exec at a multinational called Global Dynamics, graduated with a business degree from NYU. NYU, huh? Big bucks, Dee noted. Only daughter of Walter and Penelope Baker, who supposedly own a luxury yacht charter biz. Dee took notes. Address. She says she lives in a luxury high-rise on Park Avenue, but Ethan's never been there. They always meet at his place or fancy restaurants. Interesting. I'll start by checking her education and employment, then the parents. While Dee started digging, I tried to keep a normal routine. I managed my delis, smiled at customers, did the books, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept recalling Madison's look, that mix of contempt and calculation. She seemed like a predator. 3 days later, Dee called me. Martha, we need to talk in person. We met again, this time at her small office downtown. You were right, she said, opening a folder. There are a ton of inconsistencies in her story. First, Global Dynamics exists, but there's no Madison Baker on their executive payroll. I called HR pretending to do a reference check and they've never heard of her. My heart sank. And the university? NYU has no graduation record for anyone with that name in the last 10 years. I even emailed the registrar's office with a story about an alumni reunion. So she lied about everything? I'm not done yet. Her parents' yacht charter business? There's no company registered under the name Walter or Penelope Baker in that line of work. There is a Walter Baker who owns a small dry cleaner in Queens, but I doubt that's her dad. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. My son was about to marry a total fake. And the apartment, Dee smiled. This is where it gets juicy. The address she gives is for a luxury building, but I checked with the doorman pretending to be a delivery person, and no Madison lives there. So where does she live? Good question. We need to find out. I suggest surveillance. We can follow her after a date with your son. It was extreme, but I agreed. My son was in deep trouble, and I'd do anything to protect him. The next night, when Ethan mentioned he was meeting Madison for dinner, I gave the info to Dee. She staked out the area near the restaurant. I watched my son arrive with Madison. She was killer in a red dress, him beaming by her side. It hurt to see him so happy, knowing it was all built on a lie. Dee followed the couple when they left. Madison said goodbye to Ethan after dinner, saying she had an early meeting and needed to get some shut-eye. He tried to drive her home, but she insisted on taking an Uber. After Ethan left, she hailed a car, but not to the fancy address she'd given my son. The Uber dropped her off at a modest apartment complex in the Jersey suburbs. Nothing lavish, nothing fancy. Dee took discreet photos and noted the address. The next day we went back to the location. Dee talked to the neighbors, pretending to conduct a consumer survey. We discovered that Madison had lived there for 4 years alone in a small one-bedroom. But what does she do for work? Dee asked one nosy neighbor. The woman shrugged. I don't know. She leaves all dolled up every day. Comes back late. Some folks say she works at high-end events. Others say she's a high-class escort, if you catch my drift. My stomach turned. What else was Madison hiding? I convinced Dee to expand the investigation. She used her contacts in the local police department and got access to financial records. What we found was even more shocking. Madison had massive debts, maxed out credit cards, unpaid loans, and even a lawsuit for fraud at a jewelry store. And there was more. A police report from 2 years ago. A middle-aged man had accused her of theft and extortion. The charge was later dropped, likely after some kind of settlement. Martha, this woman is a total con artist, Dee concluded. And your son is the next mark. I needed to confront Ethan with this info, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. He was completely blinded by love. I needed irrefutable proof. That's when Dee suggested something extreme. We need to get inside her apartment. See what she's hiding there. Isn't that breaking and entering? Technically, yes. But we can come up with an excuse. Say there was a leak affecting the apartment below. I have a friend who can pose as the building manager. The idea was risky, even illegal. But when I thought about Ethan handing his life over to a scammer, everything he could lose, I decided some risks were necessary. A week later, we managed to get into Madison's apartment when she wasn't there. The place was small but organized, with a few expensive-looking pieces mixed in with cheap furniture. It looked like the apartment of someone trying to keep up appearances. In the closet, we found designer clothes, many still with the tags on. Some we suspected were knockoffs. There was also an impressive collection of pricey handbags. In the bathroom, high-end makeup and imported perfumes. She blows all her money on appearances, Dee commented. That's when we spotted something weird. A large locked trunk at the back of the closet. It looked heavy and had several padlocks. What could be in there? I whispered. Something she wants to keep very hush-hush, Dee replied. We couldn't open it without leaving a trace, and our time was running out. But now we knew what to look for. In the following weeks, as the wedding loomed, we kept digging. What we would find inside Madison's trunk would be the final nail in the coffin of her perfect plan, and it would change my son's life forever. The setup time was flying. There were only 6 weeks until the wedding, and I still didn't have solid proof to show Ethan. Sure, we knew Madison lied about her address, job, and education. But to my son, that could just be an insecure woman trying to impress him. The mystery of the locked trunk obsessed me. What could be so important that it needed all those locks? We need to find a way to open that, I told Dee during our weekly meeting. Without forcing it, she asked. Impossible. We'd need the key. An idea sparked. What if we create a situation where she needs to open the trunk in front of us? Dee raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you thinking? An emergency? Something that forces her to pull something out? We started hatching a plan. We figured Madison kept important documents in the trunk. We figured this out when she needed her passport for a renewal and quickly stopped by her apartment before a date with Ethan. Our chance came when Ethan casually mentioned that Madison was planning a surprise party for him, supposedly paid for by her parents. She wants you to help her with the decorations, he said. I think it's her way of trying to make nice with you. I smiled, pretending to be thrilled about the attempted reconciliation. In reality, I saw my opening. On the agreed-upon day, I went to Madison's apartment. She seemed jumpy having me there in that simple place that contradicted all the stories she told my son. Ethan doesn't know I live here, she said quickly. I'm looking for a better place before the wedding. Of course, I replied politely. Don't worry, I won't breathe a word. She relaxed a little. We started working on the so-called surprise party, which I suspected was just an excuse to probe me about Ethan's financial situation. Martha, she began as we went over fake guest lists. Ethan told me you have 5 coffee bars. Yes, I built my small business over 20 years. And are you thinking of, retiring soon? There it was. The question about inheritance, about what Ethan might receive down the line. Oh no, I replied calmly. I love working. I'll probably only stop when I kick the bucket, and even then I have partners. The delis wouldn't automatically go to Ethan. I saw a flicker of disappointment cross her face. We kept working and then I put my plan into action. I pretended to get a call. Hello? Yes, this is she. What? Oh my God. When? Yes, she's with me now. I understand. I'll let her know. I hung up and looked at Madison with a worried expression. That was the bank. There was an attempted fraud on your account. Someone tried to make a huge transfer overseas. The manager said they managed to block it, but they need you to get down to the branch right now with your identification documents. All of them. Her face went ghost white. Which branch? The Chase on Wall Street. The manager's name is Tony. He's expecting you in 40 minutes. Madison panicked. My documents. I need the originals. They're locked up. Where? I asked innocently. She hesitated for a second, then ran to the closet. I followed her discreetly and watched as she knelt before the trunk. Nervously, she unlocked the padlocks one by one. When the lid lifted, I managed to glimpse the contents. There were documents, yes, but there was also much more: fake IDs with different names but her photo, multiple credit cards, burner phones, a small machine that looked like it was for making plastic cards, and most disturbingly photos of older, wealthy men next to detailed notes about their habits, tastes, and most importantly, their assets. My son was just the latest in a long line. She quickly grabbed an envelope with documents and slammed the trunk shut. As she turned, I noticed she had forgotten to lock one of the padlocks in her haste. I'll come with you, I offered. No, she almost shouted. I mean, it's not necessary. I'll go straight there. Thanks for the heads up. As soon as she left, I called Dee, who was waiting nearby. She's gone. One of the locks is open. Dee arrived in minutes. We went back to the closet and opened the trunk. What we found inside was the complete arsenal of a professional con artist. Besides what I had already seen, there were notebooks detailing previous operations, men she had seduced, how much she managed to squeeze out of each one, the techniques that worked. There was even a timeline for the scam on Ethan with financial goals and dates for each stage. The most disturbing was the final entry. Wedding - full access to assets - transfer to an offshore account - disappearance. We took pictures of everything, dozens of photos. We also found statements for an account in the Cayman Islands, where she apparently stashed the money from her scams. Martha, this is too big, Dee said. She's not just a simple gold digger. She's part of something bigger. Look at these names here. They're well-known businessmen. And these notes about the next one and replacement. You think she works with other people? I'm positive. This is a sophisticated operation. We closed the trunk, making sure to leave the same padlock open. When Madison returned and noticed, she'd think it was her own oversight in her rush. I couldn't sleep that night. The images from the trunk, the cold notes on how to manipulate my son, the detailed plan to take him to the cleaners, swirled in my head. How could I tell him? How could I make him see the truth without completely crushing him? I tried the next day. I called him to a cafe. I showed him some of the photos. "What kind of a prank is this?" he asked, irritated. "It's not a joke, son. Madison is a professional con artist. She doesn't work where she says, she didn't go to the school she claims, she doesn't live where she says, and she's planning to rob you blind. Did you hire someone to spy on her? Did you break into her house? Mom, have you lost your marbles? Ethan, look at these notes. She has it all planned out, how much she's gonna take from you when she's gonna vanish." He stood up furious. "Enough is enough. I know you never liked her, but this is sick. You're trying to wreck my wedding out of pure jealousy." "Jealousy, Ethan? I'm trying to protect you." "From what? From being happy? From building my own family? From finally having someone who pays attention to me without trying to micromanage every aspect of my life?" His words hit me like a physical blow. Is that what he truly thought? That I controlled him? "You're blind, son. She manipulated you to turn you against me. She showed me that I need to set boundaries with you. You're always hovering over me like I'm incompetent, always poking your nose into my decisions." He grabbed the photos and ripped them up. "I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. The wedding is still on. If you can't accept Madison into the family, maybe it's better if you don't show up." And he stormed out, slamming the door. I was devastated. Not only had I failed to convince him, but now I risked losing him completely. Madison had done an expert job of isolating him from me. I called D desperate. He didn't believe me. He thinks I'm a jealous nutcase. It was predictable. Con artists like Madison are pros at creating family rifts. Isolating the victim is part of the playbook. What do we do now? We need something stronger than photos. Something he can't ignore. Like what? A public scene at the wedding? They'll have me tossed out before I can say a word. Not if we have irrefutable proof and people he can't ignore to present it. That's when we came up with our final plan. It wouldn't just be me exposing Madison. It would be her previous victims. Over the next 4 weeks, Dee and I worked nonstop with the information from the trunk. We tracked down 3 men Madison had scammed before. A doctor who lost nearly $1 million, a businessman who had to sell his company to cover debts she incurred in his name, and an elderly widower who lost his house. Initially, they didn't want to get involved. Fear of public exposure. But when they heard she was about to claim another victim, they agreed to help. We also dug up more on the organization behind Madison. She wasn't working solo. There were at least 5 other women using the same scheme, all connected to a guy named Victor Meyer, who seemed to be the puppet master. The wedding day was fast approaching. Ethan barely talked to me. Madison had convinced him to block my number to keep me at bay. She was closing the net, isolating him completely. But I was ready for the final showdown. On the wedding day I wouldn't be alone. And Madison would find out that underestimating a mother determined to protect her son was her biggest mistake. The showdown. The wedding day dawned with a perfect blue sky. The luxury beachfront resort, supposedly paid for by Madison's non-existent wealthy parents, was flawlessly decorated with white orchids and gold ribbons. Elegant guests mingled in the garden, mimosas in hand, oohing and awing over the bride's taste. I arrived early wearing the best I had. A discreet navy blue dress I bought just for the occasion. I hadn't been invited to the bride's prep, nor the rehearsal dinner the day before. In fact, they seated me in the last row of the ceremony, practically hidden behind a pillar. Madison's handiwork, no doubt. My heart ached seeing the final arrangements, knowing what was about to go down. But when I thought of the trunk full of evidence, the previous victims, the detailed plan to destroy my son, my resolve hardened. Dee arrived shortly after, low-key in a gray pantsuit, looking more like a distant aunt than a private investigator. We exchanged a quick nod. Everything was set. In a private room at the resort, our special guests were waiting. The doctor, the businessman, the widower. They had all been played by Madison. They all had heartbreaking stories to tell. And they were all nervous but determined. At 4 p.m. the ceremony began. Soft music, flowers, the smiling officiant. It all looked like something out of a fairy tale. Ethan waited at the altar, handsome in his dark suit, anxious and happy. My eyes welled up seeing him there, so vulnerable without knowing it. Then came Madison, stunning in a dress that cost, according to my research, more than she could honestly earn in a whole year. She floated down the aisle alone. Her parents had sent a last-minute wire saying they were stranded in Aspen due to a sudden blizzard. Another convenient lie. The officiant started talking about love, commitment, and honesty. The irony was almost unbearable. When it came time for the famous line, "If anyone objects to this union," my heart was pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. But we stayed put. That wasn't the moment. Our plan was different. The officiant continued. Vows were exchanged. Madison spoke promises of eternal love with such conviction that if I didn't know the truth, I would have believed every word. Ethan, for his part, spoke from the heart. It was genuine. It was real. And that made everything even more gut-wrenching. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant finally announced. They kissed. Applause erupted, smiles, rice was thrown. The couple walked hand in hand down the aisle toward the reception that would take place in the resort's gardens in the Hamptons. Now the real battle began. As the guests moved to the gardens, I gave the signal to Dee. It was time to position our special guests. The doctor, Dr. Philip Mendez, discreetly placed himself near the main table. The businessman, Chuck Vance, near the bar. The widower, Mr. Ernie Keller, near the entrance. I sat at my assigned table, the furthest from the main table, of course. Madison had made sure to keep me far from the spotlight. The reception kicked off with music, cocktails, and lively chatter. Madison moved among the guests like a queen, accepting congratulations, introducing family friends who I knew were just hired extras to create the illusion of social connection she didn't have. Then came the speeches. The best man spoke first, then a childhood friend of Madison's who, according to our research, she had only met 3 months prior. Finally, it was the newlyweds' turn. Ethan thanked everyone for coming. He spoke about his love, about how Madison had changed his life. He was radiant, truly happy, and it tore me up inside. What came next would completely shatter him. Madison took the microphone, beaming. "I want to thank everyone for sharing this special day with us, especially my dear parents, who, while they can't be here physically, are here in spirit." Line number 1. As many of you know, I come from a family that has always valued hard work, honesty, and integrity. Line number 2. And I am so happy to have found those same qualities in Ethan. That's when Dr. Philip Mendez stood up. Tall, gray-haired, with the natural authority that years of medicine had given him. He walked slowly until he was clearly visible to everyone. "Excuse the interruption," he said in a firm voice, "but I cannot stay silent while another person is being deceived." A stunned silence fell over the place. Madison froze, microphone in hand. "My name is Dr. Philip Mendez. 3 years ago, I met a woman who introduced herself as Chelsea Rollins. She claimed to be an executive at a multinational pharmaceutical company. We fell in love, or rather I fell in love." Madison started turning pale, her eyes widening in recognition. "After 6 months, she suggested joint investments. I transferred almost $1 million to an account she managed. The following week, she vanished with my money." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Ethan looked from the doctor to Madison, confusion etched on his face. "This woman," Dr. Mendez continued, pointing directly at Madison, "is not who she says she is. Her real name is neither Madison nor Chelsea, and she does this professionally. She scams men, steals from them, then disappears." "This is crazy." Madison finally found her voice. "Ethan, this man is clearly disturbed. I've never seen him before in my life." But before Ethan could respond, Chuck Vance stood up. "I knew her too," he said, approaching. "She went by Cynthia Davies then. She claimed to be a financial consultant. She got access to my company's accounts. She wired $500,000 overseas." I almost went belly up. The color had completely drained from Madison's face. Her eyes scanned the room, calculating her getaway. "This is a setup," she shrieked, her voice shaking slightly. "Ethan, your mother is behind this. She's always hated me." That's when I stood up. All heads turned to me. "It's true that I investigated you, Madison, or whatever your real name is, because you called me low-class trash while you were plotting to steal from my son." I walked toward the main table where Ethan and Madison were. "I hired an investigator." We found out you don't work where you say, didn't go to the school you claim, don't live where you say, and don't have the parents you claim, Ethan. Madison turned to my son with tears in her eyes. Fake tears, I knew. Are you going to believe these crazy people or me? Your wife. But Ethan was staring at Mr. Ernie Keller, who was now also slowly approaching, leaning on a cane. I knew her as Eliza Martin, the old man said, his voice trembling with emotion. After my wife passed, she showed up like an angel, took care of me, made me feel loved again. Then she talked me into putting her in my will. By the time I caught on, she had already mortgaged my house in my name. I lost everything. Now I live with my daughter. The hall was dead silent now, all eyes on Madison, who seemed to shrink with every second. Dee walked towards us, carrying the folder with the evidence. I have documents here, photos, financial records. Madison Baker, or whatever her name is part of an organized ring of con artists. They target vulnerable men, seduce them, isolate them from friends and family, and then rob them. Dee pulled out photos from the trunk, copies of the fake IDs, the cards, the detailed plan for the scam on Ethan. This is just the tip of the iceberg, she continued. We've already alerted the police. They're investigating the entire network. That's when Madison seemed to completely transform. The mask of the loving, fragile bride fell, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You have no idea what you're doing, she hissed. I'm not in this alone. There are powerful people involved. We know about Victor Meyer, Dee interrupted. And we've also tipped off the authorities about him. The name clearly rattled her. She looked around frantically like a cornered animal. Ethan was in shock, staring at the documents scattered on the table, the multiple identities with the face of his new wife. Madison, he finally said, his voice broken, please tell me this isn't true. For a moment she seemed to consider keeping up the lie. Then seeing she was surrounded, something in her eyes changed. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. Fear gave way to something hard, almost proud. You know what your problem is, Ethan? You're pathetic. So desperate for love that you believed every word I said. So easy to manipulate. Every word was a knife in my son's heart. I saw his face twist in pain. You think I actually fell for you? A boring engineer who lives in a dumpy apartment and drives a 5-year-old Honda? Gimme a break. She turned to me, her eyes full of hatred. And you, the proud coffee shop owner, thinking you're so smart. You know why I called you trash? Because that's what you are. All of you are common people living basic lives, thinking that has any value. The entire room was stunned by the transformation. The sweet bride had turned into a cruel stranger right before our eyes. You may think you've won today, she continued, taking off the wedding ring and tossing it on the table. But it's not over. This is bigger than you imagine. That's when we heard sirens approaching. Dee smiled slightly. She had timed it perfectly. Actually, Madison, it is over, she said calmly. The police are here with a warrant for your arrest. Not just for fraud, but also for extortion and identity theft. 2 uniformed officers entered the hall, followed by a plainclothes detective, who I recognized as a contact of Dee's. Martha Green, Madison suddenly spat out, looking directly at me. Your real name before you opened your first coffee bar, before you became the respectable businesswoman. Why don't you tell everyone where you really came from? My blood ran cold. She knew. Somehow she had investigated my past too. What are you talking about? Ethan asked, confused. Madison smiled maliciously. Ask your mother about the 5 years before you were born. Ask her how she really got the seed money to open her first deli. I had underestimated Madison, or overestimated her. She had done her homework. She had found my secrets. The police were closing in. She took a step toward me. The difference between us, Martha, is that you hide behind a facade of respectability. At least I know what I am. The officers reached her, cuffing her wrists as they read her rights. Before they led her away, she looked one last time at Ethan. Maybe we should have met under different circumstances. You were tolerable. As they escorted her out, the guests stood in stunned silence. Years later, many would say it was the most memorable wedding they had ever attended. But in that moment all I could think about was my son, about what should have been the happiest day of his life, and about Madison's final words hanging over me like a threat. Because she was right about one thing. I had secrets too. And now, in the middle of the chaos I had helped create, I feared they would also come to light. The truth comes out. The room quickly emptied. Some guests left in awkward silence. Others stayed in small groups, whispering excitedly about the drama they had just witnessed. The resort staff looked lost, unsure whether to keep serving champagne or start tearing down the decorations. Ethan sat alone at the main table, staring at the abandoned ring Madison had thrown down. I approached him cautiously. So. He looked up, and what I saw in his eyes broke my heart. Pain, confusion, and something else, suspicion. What did she mean about your past? This wasn't how I wanted this conversation to happen. Not here, not now, not after the trauma he had just been through. But maybe there was no perfect time for hard truths. Can we talk about this at home? This isn't the place. No, he said firmly. I just found out my wife of 2 hours is a criminal. That our entire relationship was a lie. I can't handle any more secrets, Mom. Just the truth, please. I looked around. The few remaining guests were far enough away. Dee had left with the police to give formal statements. We were relatively alone. I sat down next to him. I took a deep breath. I wasn't always the person you know. Before I had you, before the coffee bars, I was in a very dark place. His eyes never left mine. I grew up dirt poor out in rural West Virginia. My father drank, my mother worked 3 jobs. When I turned 16, I ran away to New York City, dreaming of a better life. I paused, feeling the weight of the words to come. The city wasn't kind to me. No education, no contacts, no money. I ended up on the street. That's when I met Rico. The name still sent a shiver down my spine, even after all these years. He offered me a roof, food, protection. And in return, I worked for him. Doing what? Ethan asked, his voice strangely calm. I started as a cocktail waitress in bars he controlled, then collecting gambling debts. Eventually, I became what they call a lure. I would find wealthy men at parties, bars, events. I'd gain their trust. Then I'd lead them into situations where Rico and his crew could exploit that trust. You conned them, he said bluntly. Yes, I admitted, shame burning my face. But never physically. It was mostly fake investment schemes. The men thought they were getting into legitimate businesses. They lost money, but they kept their pride. Many never even reported it. Ethan was silent for a few seconds, processing. For how long? Almost 5 years. And how did you get out? I smiled sadly. I met your father. George was different from any man I'd ever met. He saw right through my act, but instead of judging me, he offered me help. Real help, without asking for anything in return. Tears started to well up in my eyes. I initially targeted him. He had a small construction company. He was doing well. I thought it would be easy, but I couldn't go through with the scam. I ended up confessing everything to him. I expected him to turn me over to the cops. Instead, he helped me escape that life. And the money for the first coffee bar? Ethan asked, remembering Madison's specific accusation. That was after your father passed away. The insurance paid out a small but significant sum. I could have done a lot of things with that money, but I chose to build something legitimate, something you could be proud of one day. I looked at my hands, which were shaking slightly. Ethan, I know this changes how you see me, but I swear, ever since I met your father, I have lived an honest life. Every dime in those delis was earned through hard work. Every customer was treated with respect. I tried to make up for the bad I did by building something good. The silence between us felt endless. Finally, Ethan spoke. So you and her, you're not so different. The words hit me like a slap. The difference, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, is that I stopped. I chose to change. I chose the hard path of building something real instead of continuing to take shortcuts. What if she wanted to change too? What if inside that woman they just hauled away in handcuffs, there was someone like you waiting for a second chance? The question caught me off guard. So typical of my son, even shattered by betrayal, he could still see the possibility of redemption in others. Maybe there was, I answered softly, but she would have to want that change. She would have to make the hard decisions I made. No one can do it for her. Ethan looked back at the abandoned ring. I loved her, you know. I really did. It was all fake for her, but it was real for me. I know, son. How do I move on from this? How do I ever trust anyone again? I placed my hand on his. One day at a time. Your father taught me that when you're trying to rebuild your life, you can't look too far into the future. Just do the right thing today, then tomorrow, and then the next day. He nodded slowly. Any other secrets I should know about? One thing. I thought for a moment. Rico, the man I worked for, he died in prison 12 years ago. But before that, he swore he'd find me when he got out. That fear never completely left me. It's why I was always so protective of you. Maybe overly so. I was afraid my past would come back to haunt us. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Why did you never tell me before? I wanted to protect you. And to be honest, I was ashamed. I wanted you to grow up seeing your mother only as the strong woman who built a business from scratch, not as someone who once scammed people to survive. Just like you wanted me to see Madison as the wonderful woman you thought she was, not the con artist I suspected. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I think we both need to be more honest from now on, I said softly. Yeah, he agreed. No more secrets. No more well-intentioned lies. We stood up together, leaving behind the reception hall that should have celebrated a new beginning, but had instead witnessed the end of so many illusions. On the way home in the car, Ethan asked one more question. How did you know? How did you know something was wrong with her from the very beginning? I thought carefully before answering. When you spend years deceiving people, you learn to recognize the tells in others. The way she avoided certain topics, how she never let anyone verify her stories, how she subtly isolated you. I knew those tactics because I used them. So it was your dark past that ended up saving me. Maybe. Or maybe it was just a mother's instinct. He smiled faintly, the first smile since everything fell apart. What do we do now? Now we go home. We make some strong coffee. We cry a little if we need to. And tomorrow we start over. The shadow remains. 2 days later. Ethan and I were sitting in my office at the main coffee bar when Dee walked in. She had a strange look on her face, a mix of satisfaction and concern. Good news and bad news, she said, taking a seat with us. The good news is the police found Victor Meyer's hideout. He had documentation of at least 12 similar schemes in progress. Several women like Madison targeting different men. And the bad news? Ethan asked. Madison disappeared. How? Wasn't she in custody? She was released on bail to await trial. She posted the bond and was supposed to wear an ankle monitor, but before it was even fitted, she vanished. We think she has fake papers and access to offshore accounts. A chill ran down my spine. She'll be back, I said. People like her always come back, especially when they're publicly humiliated. The police are looking, Dee assured us, and we have restraining orders against her for both of you. After Dee left, Ethan was thoughtful. You know, Mom, I've been thinking about all this. About you, about Madison, about second chances, and I think I understand better now why you kept your past a secret, and also why it's so hard for someone like Madison to change. How so? It's easier to keep being who you've always been than to reinvent yourself. You had the guts to make that hard choice. Madison didn't. Yet, I added. She hasn't made that choice yet. Who knows what the future holds? He smiled sadly, ever the optimist. Not an optimist. A realist. Change is possible. I'm living proof of that. In the following weeks, Ethan slowly started rebuilding his life. He canceled the honeymoon. He returned gifts. He dealt with the annulment paperwork. I kept the coffee bars running, but I also stayed vigilant. If Madison had discovered my past, who else could? A month after the disastrous wedding, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside, just one handwritten sentence. Maybe we're more alike than you think. G. I didn't show it to Ethan. He was starting to heal. Instead, I kept the letter as a reminder that the past never truly leaves us. We can build new lives, new identities, but the shadows remain. And sometimes, when I look out the coffee bar window in the early morning hours, I imagine I see a familiar figure watching from a distance. A woman with many names and many faces, calculating her next move. Because I learned one thing in my years in that life. A good con artist never accepts a loss. And Madison, or whatever her real name was one of the best I'd ever seen. Our story wasn't over. It was just starting a new chapter. The unexpected visitor. 6 months passed since the disastrous wedding. Life slowly returned to a new normal. Ethan threw himself into his work, taking on a major engineering project that kept him busy day and night. I expanded my coffee bar network, opening a 6th location in an upscale neighborhood in Boca Raton. The investigations into the ring of con artists continued. Victor Meyer was arrested along with 3 of his associates, but Madison remained missing. A ghost hanging over our lives. On a Saturday morning, I was alone in the main coffee bar, getting everything ready before the opening. The smell of freshly roasted beans filled the air as I checked the inventory. The bell on the door chimed, which was odd, because I was sure the closed sign was visible. Sorry, we're not open yet. The words died in my throat. There, standing in the doorway, was her. Not the Madison from the wedding, in a bridal gown and expensive jewelry. This version wore simple jeans, a white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, no mask of sophistication. "Hello, Martha," she said, her voice different, less affected, more natural. "Can we talk?" My first instinct was to grab the phone. "I'm calling the police." "Please," she held up her hands. "Just 5 minutes. Then you can call whoever you want." Something in her posture, in the absence of the arrogant air I knew, made me hesitate. 5 minutes. She sat at one of the tables. I kept my distance, phone in hand, ready to dial. "First, my real name is Jennifer LaSalle." The revelation took me by surprise. It was the first time she had voluntarily offered something true about herself. "Why are you here, Jennifer?" "There's a warrant out for your arrest." "I know. I'm going to turn myself in. But before I did, I wanted to talk to you." From one former con artist to another. Her words hit home. "How did you know about my past?" "Victor keeps files on all the major scams of the last 30 years. Your operation with Rico was legendary in the right circles. When I started dating Ethan, Victor gave me your file. It was a form of incentive. See, even the reformed ones can fall." I felt a chill. The idea of my past being documented, studied by criminals. "What do you want from me?" She took a deep breath. "I want to know how you did it." "Did what?" "Got out. Rebuilt your life. Became this." She gestured around the coffee bar at me. "Someone respectable. Someone real." The vulnerability in her voice seemed genuine, but I had been fooled by her before. "Why should I believe this isn't just another one of your games?" Memoirs of Aunt Martha.